So, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Traci Stein, as always. I'm so happy to be here with you. I've got such an interesting guest today. Her name is Elizabeth Greenwood. We're going to talk about her most recent book, which is Everyday Intuition: What Psychology, Science, and Psychics Can Teach Us About Finding and Trusting Our Inner Voice. Liz is also the author of other books, and she's a journalist. The other books are Love in the Time of Incarceration, Five Stories of Dating, Sex, and Marriage in America's Prisons, and Playing Dead, A Journey Through the World of Death Fraud. You can find Liz's published articles in The New Yorker, The New York Times, GQ, The Atlantic, and more. But her book is so compelling, and I think you'll find our interview compelling as well, because Liz does a few things that often we don't hear about when we're talking about intuition. Number one, she distinguishes between intuition and psychic phenomena, two terms that I often use interchangeably. But Liz makes a really great case for talking about them as distinct phenomena. I'll tell you what I mean, and then you'll hear more from Liz. Intuitive ability is a combination of things that we are hardwired for and that we learn to use automatically, often in what seems like the blink of an eye. So, everything from pattern recognition to drawing upon our knowledge and experience in a way that can often happen below the level of conscious awareness. And again, so rapidly that it can feel like magic. Liz also talks about psychic phenomena, and I think she does a great job of talking about this objectively and looking at the science to support these phenomena. By the end of this episode, you'll have a better understanding about the science behind intuition, some of the work in psychic research, but even more important, how you can learn to tap into your own intuition to be more connected and more informed in your daily life and not get bogged down by things that seem to us like intuition but aren't, like our anxiety. So, without further ado, let's get to the episode. Liz, thank you so much for being here today. I was so excited to see mention of your book. I was not aware of it, and I opened the Columbia magazine and I thought, holy cow, I have got to reach out to this woman, and I hope she'll come on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, that makes me so happy. Yeah, by any means necessary. Any way they can find out about intuition, it's great. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. And, one of the things that I was so struck by, because a lot of times, especially in the vaunted halls of a lot of these elite institutions, intuition is like a dirty word. And I
Mhm,
think oftentimes people feel compelled to devalue it for a number of reasons. And
mhm.
you talk a little bit about that in your book. So I was so glad to see that you approached this from a number of different angles. But I'm wondering if you want to give people a quick overview of your book and how you became interested in this topic. And maybe we'll start there.
Great, that sounds good. So, the book is called Everyday Intuition: What Psychology, Science, and Psychics Can Teach Us About Finding and Trusting Our Inner Voice. And just as you alluded to, I do take a very broad and holistic view of intuition. One of the things that struck me so much when I started poking around this topic is that the hardest science, neuroscience, looks at intuition, as do psychics, witches, and so I thought, gosh, could they possibly be talking about the same thing? And indeed, they are. They're just going at it with very different methodologies and tools and language. So I was really interested in that. Um, I, like maybe some of your listeners, I feel like I always have been pretty intuitive, but intuition gets really confused for me with other what I call kind of doppelganger experiences, like anxiety. You get the feeling you're walking out the door and you're like, oh no, maybe I better turn back. So, what is that? Is that intuition? Like you're predicting something, some kind of premonition? Or is that just plain old garden variety fear, anxiety, whatever else? So, my mission in this book was really to untangle intuition, define it, practice it, from, again, a lot of different schools of thought, honing my own intuition just to see how this could, make my everyday life better. And indeed, it does make your everyday life better. So, what I came to find for is that intuition, to give kind of the most rigorous scientific definition, it is pattern recognition based on experience that is this whole kind of ensemble of neural functions happening all at once. It's memory activation, it is a somatic experience. So let me just give you this example.
Yeah.
You walk, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't want to cut
No,
you off.
absolutely. I love that you're talking about it that way, and if you could just I think your examples are perfect to help, a broad range of people understand
Yes.
what you're talking about, because I think they will relate very much so to what you're gonna talk about.
So here's what I'm talking about when I talk about intuition. What neuroscience talks about is that it's pattern recognition. So you walk into a room and you get a vibe, right? And we call that intuition sometimes. But what's really happening is that you are an expert. You have domain expertise because you have walked into rooms before. Therefore, you are drawing on some past memory, and maybe that memory is being activated in a somatic way. So, and this can be below the level of conscious understandings, can be subperceptual. Maybe you get a bad vibe and that feels like a kind of constriction in your throat or a feeling in your stomach. And that sense memory, that's triggering something in you where you are then making meaning from these feelings about what you see. So, you get this icky feeling, bad vibe, I want to stay away. That at its most elemental is intuition. We all have it because it is an incredibly adaptive, evolutionary function for us to be able to read and chunk information very quickly and to understand it. If you did not have intuition, you would be like walking out into traffic. And I don't think anyone who listens to you is doing such things. So that's the kind of scientific definition of intuition. But what I found is that we can apply that framework of pattern recognition back on ourselves to what are my anxious patterns? How do I know this is intuition versus something else? Like for me, I'm a big catastrophizer. That's where everything in my mind goes. So when I walk out the door and I have that feeling of, oh gosh, I want to turn back, what is that exactly? Gosh, is my mind going to, oh no, there's going to be some horrible thing that happens on the train? Because if that's the kind of feeling I'm getting, I know my patterns. I tend to catastrophize. So I can be pretty certain that that's not intuition. So for me, intuition became this real frame, almost lens on mindfulness. It became this lens on self knowledge for how I can begin to know and understand and appreciate where my mind and my body go in instances of uncertainty, to be able to better categorize intuition, anxiety, something else. So for me, intuition really means self-trust. It means that when you get some kind of inclination, feeling, sensation, you can know what to do with that and you can trust it. And that is incredibly edifying. And I think that what I really want to encourage people to do is to use that in really small, everyday ways. I think one of the things that drives me crazy about intuition is that we trot it out at these high stakes moments when it's like real estate or a job or a relationship, and people say, well, what does your gut say? And you don't know because you haven't, learn to trust your gut in everyday life. So when I talk about everyday intuition, I mean just that. Like, what's the perfect outfit to wear today? Do I want to put in my contacts first or brush my teeth first? And this is the way we start building the relationship with our intuition.
Go with low stakes, everyday things
Yes,
first.
precisely.
You have so many great examples in your book, by the way, which is so well researched. I feel like it's worth reading a few times, easily because there's so much in there between the science and your analysis of it and your way of relating it to everyday, experiences that most people can say, "Oh, I get that." I mean,
Thank you so much.
you mentioned catastrophizing,
Oh,
which for
yeah.
people not familiar with the term, I think a lot of people are, but is making something catastrophic. That might even
Hmm.
be just garden variety unpleasant or maybe not
Oh,
bad at
yeah.
all. I think you mentioned, like, thinking, "Oh, I'm going to go on this vacation and my flight's going to get canceled, or I'm going to forget my cell phone in the taxi or something
Mhm.
like that. And noticing how that feels in your body as compared to some of the other intuitive experiences you describe in the book, where somebody has a sudden kind of calm knowing that something is not right, and they learn to recognize how that presents in their body and mind.
And how it's different from the other experiences. And you really nailed it just now when you said it's a calm knowing. Intuition often does not come with the emotional drama that these other habits of mind, like catastrophizing, doomsday thinking, whatever it is, the negative filtering, where we have really big feelings about it and what the stories they mean about us and our station in the world. So, intuition, more often than not, is almost always a little more neutral. And that came from a real couple really interesting places in the research. So I interviewed some ER doctors. I think when we watch medical shows, when, this person comes in with this, suite of mysterious symptoms, and the doctor says, well, have you tried blah, blah, blah? And it looks like magic, like, how are they doing that? Really, of course, what that is pattern recognition based on domain expertise. But, to us mere mortals, we're like, whoa. So I interviewed some ER doctors about, some experiences, similar to that they had in their work practice, where the outcome was really different than the prognosis and how they clocked that. So one gentleman I talked to, his name is Dr. Dustin Ballard. He's in the Bay Area. He told me about a patient he had who came in with a very kind of textbook, um, not at all out of something crazy, like a very small brain bleed. And the patient said, I'm going to die. And Dr. Ballard was like, no, you're not. We are going to transfer you to somewhere that has, a very good neurology department just for monitoring, et cetera, et cetera. And he kept saying very calmly, I'm going to die.
The patient.
Turns out
Yeah.
the patient said this. Turns a doctor, ER doctors, they hear this a lot. People come in and they're terrified. People will
Yeah.
say, I'm gonna die. So this wasn't something that he had never heard before. But what struck him was the patient's affect. And it turns out, tragically, a few weeks later, his condition did really deteriorate. This patient did end up dying. So Dr. Ballard started looking into this kind of premonitions of death that people will have. And it's always very calm. It's never crazed, keyed up emotional. So, and then another place in the research this came up is talking to researchers who've looked at premonitions in dreams, because I think, so many of us get these kind of downloads at night about, something's going to happen, positive, negative, whatever. And what they found is that dreamers who awoke with a very aroused state, so maybe you have the dream about you can't find your class on the first day of college, and you wake up and your heart's pounding, and you know you're sweaty and all that, those are really just anxiety dreams. That is your brain's very unpleasant but healthy way of just working out anxiety in the night. On the other hand, when people have awoken with a very neutral, just like a fact, this has already happened sort of feeling, those dreams did end up coming true. So, intuition, neutral. Other doppelganger emotions are much more emotionally charged and keyed up.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because believe it or not, one of the most common questions I get about intuition, from people who wanna develop their intuition more is, how can you tell the difference? And
Hmm.
I always say sometimes an intuition, even though it comes in neutrally, the awareness of what it is might generate a feeling later,
Yes,
but it's not the same, you're right, as your heart pounding because you're having an anxiety attack, because
right.
in the background in your mind, you've got some other things percolating that have been generating anxiety all along.
Absolutely. And it's a really good distinction to make. And this is not always to say that whenever you get an intuition about something, it's going to be like, sunshine and flowers, because it's not, I always joke that I wrote the least popular self-help book in the world, because when you start listening to your intuition, it can make your life a lot harder in the short term, because intuition will give you difficult information and it might arouse certain feelings. For example, your relationship's not right, or the career that you have invested so much in is no longer aligned to where you are. And those are hard pills to swallow, and you're going to have feelings about them. But the experience of the intuition itself, I think the best way I heard this described was by Daria Alton. She's a graphic designer in Brooklyn, and she said, intuition is a comment, anxiety is a question. So the distinction being, he's not the one versus he's not the one. Maybe I could make him the one. Maybe I'm missing something, right? It's the kind of spiraling sensation. Yeah.
I wrote down a whole bunch of things, so bear with me a second because there are many examples that you described, and I'm gonna come back to it too because often when I talk about intuition, I'll use it interchangeably with, psychic perception, but honestly, after reading your book, I think I need to make a more concerted effort to distinguish between the 2 because you are talking about different mechanisms. And I know that the psychic chapter was more kind of a chapter in the book. The intuition is like the broader umbrella. But again, you interviewed so many scientists, and the theme that they kept coming up with, and you really drove home, was that intuition we're wired for. Knowing yourself is really fundamental to recognizing your intuition, your patterns, and your vulnerabilities. Expertise makes people recognize information that others would miss, and it happens so rapidly, often without conscious awareness of the process. That is one way of looking at intuition. It is not the
Mhm.
quote woo woo way, and I'm not using woo woo in a devaluing way, but
Sure, if
um,
I could just jump in and say something to
yeah,
the
please
psychic
do,
part.
please do. I have to take a quick break, but I'll return in a few moments with more on Unpacking Possibility. Stay tuned.
Yeah, what I believe about that, and what the psychics I interviewed say, is that intuition is kind of the foundation of all psychic ability. And again, it's something we all have. And I think that any psychic worth his or her salt would say that we all have the ability to kind of open ourselves up to these different frequencies of information. And developing your intuition is really key to that. What psychics are so good at is tuning into what is mine, what is my field, and what is your field,
Yeah,
And the way they start to do that is through like pattern recognition and really knowing themselves and what their own energy feels like so much. So I think that they are related, and intuition is the like base layer of the croissant.
I love that. And it's funny, I'll come back to the other thing I was gonna touch on that you made me think of. Because I personally don't think of it, and I know a lot of people in my field think of intuition as it's okay if you're talking about it as clinical intuition or in the ways a
Right,
scientist would talk about it,
right.
but it is bad if you talk about an unscientific and, you're now in another category and that one that's not scientific. If you talk about information coming from elsewhere, like they're
Uh,
2 separate things, but as somebody who does intuitive work, not professionally, but is trained in it, what the thing I've always noticed is that your repertoire of information makes you a better intuitive in the scientific sense, but it also
mm,
makes you a better psychic because you have more information at your disposal to
right.
interpret or describe something that is intangible. It
That really tracks, yeah, that makes so much sense, and what I love, in the behavioral psychology research is that, you know, as you mentioned at the top of the program, is that intuition, it's so easy to castigate as like this unrigorous, very silly thing. And, people make rational, intellectual decisions. But what the researchers find time and time again is that most people make intuitive decisions and then they'll use their rational faculties to sign off on what they've already decided intuitively. So I just kind of look askance now at people who say, "Oh no, I'm very rational. I'm very okay, sure,
It's either
sure."
or.
Right.
I wanna come back to something that you mentioned a few minutes ago, and I can't remember for in my apparently disorganized note-taking, I can't remember the name of the person. Penny, or is a
Yes,
pseudonym,
yes.
but
Uh-huh.
when I read that, so many of your examples, I wanna tell you, either I had a personal example, not quite the same, or know people who have had similar examples. I think they're so relatable. But this woman, Penny, in your book, correct me if I get anything wrong, had intuitive hits, and we could say it's the scientifically accepted intuition. We don't even have to go
Right.
into the paranormal realm yet,
Right.
but about her husband who had a
Mhm.
very different secret life that
Mhm.
was antithetical to what she needed in her very normal marriage, um, and, his cheating doesn't capture it adequately. But what she said is that when the intuitive information comes in, like you said, it might not be something we wanna know, and we will
Right.
use, quote, "reason and logic" to try and check off boxes to disprove the information we don't wanna have intuitively.
That's right. That's right. We use our rationality to kind of override what our bones know, what our bodies know. So, in those cases, I write this in the book, that's magical thinking. You know something, but then you're using this other part of your brain to disprove it or to quiet it. So, intuition in those cases, I think, is like the most hard evidence you want to take to the bank. We can come up with any story in our brains to suit what we really want. Whereas intuition, when it's really firing, it won't lie to you and it will give you, unpleasant truths sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, and even you were talking about the kind of, if you know yourself and you know the difference between your anxiety and your biases, which we all have,
Mhm.
even when we don't wanna think we do, we all do. But the knowing sometimes that immediate, "That person is not a safe person for me,"
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
"This situation does not feel right," or your friend who was offered an incredible job on paper with incredible pay, hard to turn down, like you said, when you have rent to pay,
Mhm.
but she knew immediately without the hard data available until later, that her boss would be kind of a nightmare to deal with, and she would be very unhappy at this job. It wouldn't be a good fit.
Right. Right, and I mean, again, that's pattern recognition often, that you don't have to get into the woo-woo of it all. But these are real things, and, we ignore them at our own peril, and we ignore them for lots of reasons. Again, you gotta pay rent, but I think that we can take these moments and, remember them and use them later on when indeed the job does fall apart, and the boss is gaslighting you into saying this didn't work out because of you. You can go back to that moment and say, no, actually, I knew, and this is materializing just as I thought it would. So even if you can't, act, capital A, act on the intuition in the moment, I think that clocking it is really important for just developing this self trust and conversation and resilience within yourself.
Absolutely, and again, I just wanna say how much I appreciate it, and was really impressed because you interviewed, like, the all-stars of science and in multiple areas of science that would relate to intuition and our understanding of it, including a Nobel Prize winner. You cited really important factual data, and you also alluded to us being a little bit in a post-truth, anti-science world, and I think it was that much more important when you're talking about
Hmm.
something like intuition to say, "Well,
Hmm.
what is the data?" But I love
Absolutely.
also that you looked into the data for psychic ability and psychic phenomena, and I know that wasn't the it didn't feel like the main focus, but, you talked to some of the all-stars in that realm as well, like Julia Mossbridge,
Mhm.
and Teresa Chung and Jessica Utz, and people who know what they're talking about, and the data has been there for decades. And you would have to make skepticism a religion to deny the data at this point. Yeah,
Yeah, and that skepticism piece was something that was so interesting to me because I have found this now talking about my book, is people will say, "Oh, okay, well, that's all fine and good, but I'm skeptical." And what they're saying, and Jessica Utz talks about this so brilliantly, is you're not skeptical, you're denying what is here to
right.
fit a certain framework that you believe in. So that's actually the opposite of skepticism. That's
100%,
really coming in with an agenda.
100%. You had some fun examples, and some not fun examples, but that were very powerful about I'm gonna say it's psychic. I'm gonna say it's more than intuition, but, I'm also okay with saying, "All right, there's some subconscious information processing that is generating something." So one of the
Mhm,
not fun things with Salman Rushdie having a very vivid dream 2 days before being stabbed, similar setting. I could see somebody making an argument for that being solely intuition. I could
mhm.
see somebody making an argument for it being more than that. I don't know if you have thoughts.
I think that it's funny because I'm gonna contradict myself because I just said that, when people have psychic dreams, they're very neutral in tone. But I remember in his memoir, Knife, where he writes about this attack, he woke up very scared.
Yeah,
And he has such a great quote. I wish I could remember it right now, but something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing here, you don't plan your day around a dream or things that don't make sense. He said, but then all these things that don't make sense happen, right? So
absolutely.
I think that that was some kind of psychic event. He would probably disagree, but just from reading about it and hearing him speak about it and then seeing the events as they unfolded, how could it not be?
No, 100%. I do think again, I feel like these intuitions come in sometimes I think something, whether it's the universe or our higher self or our guides or whatever, maybe we don't even have to name it. But if it is imperative that we listen, then it makes sense that an intense feeling would accompany the information. But,
Yeah,
I don't think anybody can really answer the question.
right.
You also spoke about feeling suddenly impelled to go into a store and buy a Frida Kahlo candle for a friend, and you had the awareness that it didn't make any sense to you at the time. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so this was
That seems
really
psychic to
fun.
me.
It was something. This is fun. This is my favorite part of my job is I get to give myself these little, tests and kind of project-based research projects. So, this was part of at the time when I was very actively trying to develop my intuition, meaning that if I'm walking down the street, I'm going on my very well-trod route and something compels me off my route, I'm going to listen to that. So this was one of those times. I live in a very cutesy part of Brooklyn where there are lots of overpriced gift stores. And I popped into one of those. Like, 'cause I really did feel the pull, like, go in here. And I saw this Frida Kahlo candle, and a friend popped into my mind immediately where I was just like, well, she needs this candle. So I bought it for her. I gave it to her. And she said, "Oh my gosh, this is so crazy you gave this to me," because a friend of hers who had passed, they have, since this friend has died, Frida Kahlo is kind of the symbol of this friend and how she shows up in the world to the friend for whom I bought the candle. And I had no idea. I knew about this friend. I knew she died, but I did not know about this backstory. So you can call that whatever you want, but it was just a really nice moment between me and my friend, to say, wow, I was thinking about you. I acted on it. I followed through, and this had meaning for you. This made your day better somehow. So I think we could really get in the weeds about trying to figure out what all this stuff is.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, you swing and you hit sometimes, and that feels good. It feels really good. So that's my invitation to all of your listeners. You feel like crossing the street, you've got an extra 5 minutes, go for it. You don't know what's going to happen.
Absolutely. And I think also what you described to me seems classic. When information comes through that really isn't for you, you're like the messenger, right?
Yeah, the conduit.
Yeah, absolutely, because it doesn't make sense at the time necessarily. That's even more persuasive to me later on. Um,
I think so.
and it was so important for your friend.
Yeah.
You have some suggestions for people about how they can develop their intuition better. And I know you also have a workshop, you're speaking in a lot of places. So we'll definitely make sure to give people information about how to connect with you and get a copy of your great book. But talk a little bit about how people can develop their own everyday intuition better.
Yes. So I have lots of thoughts on
Ooh,
this, but I think that the biggest one we already talked about, which is start small. Really start small. And this is a process of kind of constantly checking in, because we're making decisions all day long. And when you start to interrupt just the conditioned patterns of your life, to check in with yourself about, gosh, what is it that my soul craves right now? My favorite example of this is I was leaving my house in the summer, and I had two pairs of Birkenstocks by the door. I had pink and white, and I was standing by the door with one pink and one white Birkenstock on, and I was just, which one is it more? And that day was a pink day, and I went with pink. That does not matter one iota in my life. All that mattered was that I had shoes on. But
right.
I think that, just taking a minute to stop and check in with my mood and how I was feeling, again, that just builds self-belief and confidence to what pink felt that day, like a kind of settled, calm feeling, and that's intuition to me. So, at these junctures where the stakes are very low and it's very small, just see what feels right. So that's my number one thing. And then this is also a small thing, but I think it has really big dividend. It pays big dividends, and that is writing down your dreams in the morning.
Yes.
And this is for a couple reasons. And for me, the biggest reason is not to interpret my dreams or try to make sense of them, even though that's a great thing to do. And there are about a million books out there that will help you do that, decode your dreams. But for me, clearing the psychic gunk. I have pretty vivid dreams, and they've become more vivid since I've started writing them down, but just clearing that stuff out to start the day, you just have a fresh slate, just a cleaner slate, a cleaner vessel, so that you can actually hear what intuition is and what's just residual craziness from the night. And then if you are getting premonitions, look, you've got a record. How good is that? You can say, look, it says I did, I dreamt this, and it happened. So those are just a few ideas. But then I think also this is, again, kind of a small thing, but that we've touched on a little bit, but just heeding the call. How many times are we in line at the grocery store and a friend we haven't talked to in ages pops into our brain, and then before you know it, you're just paying at the checkout counter. But if you just take a minute to text that person, say, hey, I'm thinking of you, who knows? Maybe they really needed to hear from you. So I think those little moments it's just so easy to gloss over them in the busyness of modern life, to take a second and try to honor whatever that is that's kind of bubbling up for you. That can really pay off too.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to mention you also talk about HALT, the acronym. I don't know
Oh
if
my
you want
gosh.
to mention that briefly or
Yes.
not.
Oh, yes, I do. This is so helpful. So, HALT, the acronym, this comes from like AA 12 step world, but the acronym stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And the thinking is that if you are experiencing any of these conditions, you are not to make big decisions. You're not to make even like thought decisions about the meaning of something, because really what you need to do is just lie down and like have a drink of water and like bring yourself back to equilibrium. And I think the same holds true for intuition. And is this just another way to recognize your patterns? So, Halt is like the Wheel of Fortune, RSTLNE, it's the letters you get, but then you have your particular letters. So for me, I am just crazy at night. Like I'm tired, my kids have driven me nuts all day. I start to have like dark thoughts at night. So if I'm getting anything that feels like an intuition, I'm not going to gaslight myself. I'm not going to say, no, no, that's not it. But I want to notice it and then maybe come back to that a little later, maybe in the morning after I've slept.
Sleep on it.
So sleep on it. So just evaluating where you are with halt, that can be very, very useful to figuring out what is an intuition and what might be something else.
Absolutely, and such simple but great advice, meditating, sleeping on it, waiting a little bit. Our brains always want us to act right now,
Mhm.
and you're saying give yourself permission to not.
Absolutely. When you don't know what to do, don't do anything. It's so hard. It's like the hardest thing in
Oh
the
my
world.
goodness.
Our brains want certainty. We just want the thing done. But I can tell you, I never don't regret sending the email. I always regret it. I can just keep it in drafts.
Keep that email in draft. We've all been
Yes.
there. Liz, I know you're a super busy lady, so I will reluctantly let you go for the day, but I so appreciate your taking the time. People have to read your book. It's so interesting, it's so readable, so relatable, and useful. Tell people where the best way is or the best place is to find out about you, your book, any workshops you're doing, and more.
Oh, thank you so much, Tracy. So the book is called Everyday Intuition. I always forget the subtitle, but it's
I can tell
it
you.
is psychology, science, and psychics. Yeah, that's it, right? What
Yes,
psychology, science, and psychics can teach us about finding and trusting our inner voice. Did I get it right? Okay,
beautiful,
good.
perfect.
So that's wherever books are sold, wherever is easy for you. Um, I write a Substack called Letters of Intuition, and you can subscribe to that and I will update people frequently about where I'm talking, teaching, all those good things. And then on social media at Liz Greenwood for you, number four, letter U.
I love it. I so appreciate you and your work and your time today. Liz, so nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure meeting you.
Oh, great. This has been another episode of Unpacking Possibility. If you enjoyed the episode, and I know you did, please remember to like, share, follow, leave me a comment, let me know what you think. And as always, until next time, be well.